Welcome to A Growing Concern. We're going to talk a lot about India tonight, and my guest Lua here has traveled in India, and she's going to discuss a little bit her travels over there and what she was inspired to do because of those travels. Part of that inspiration might have been beforehand, I don't know, but we're going to find out a little bit about it. And we've got some video clips to play. We're going to talk about the phony green revolution that's going on in many countries. That is well, I'll let her explain that. And the two video clips are going to be along those lines right now. But welcome to the program, Lua.
Thank you, Jim. It's really great to be back to Portland.
That's right.
I feel like I'm starting back where I was, you know, just a few years ago, even working here at PCM. So it's great to reconnect with everybody and with the community here who's been really supportive. And yeah, it's awesome.
All right. And you worked here 4 years ago, you said. So what after then is when you start traveling?
Yes, after then I traveled to California, and from there I came up with a plan to go to India. And I went to India the first time in 2009, I believe it was. And that's basically how Act Naturally got started. It didn't take me very long being in India until I realized I had a bigger purpose for being there than just being a tourist.
Was that a spiritual journey, or?
It's a little of everything, really. A little karma yoga, a little of, when I first went to India, I was going to study music, I was going to study yoga. And what happened was I noticed some contradictions right away.
From what you had gathered about what India was about?
Yeah. I think people from the West have a tendency when they go to India to think, oh, the food is going to be absolutely organic and really healthy, because if you're staying in an ashram, of course, they have as part of yoga this practice of mityahara, which is being discretionary with your food, making sure that you're not taking in any toxins, making sure that your food is eaten in the right quantity, the right amounts. And so what I discovered when I was there really was that there is some quality issues, if you will. And the food itself, you know, though it was really tasty, I noticed that I could taste chemicals, really. You know, I had some like palak from this ashram at the Sri Aurobindo ashram in Delhi, and I could taste like there was a chemical residue. And I started asking questions, really. I started going out into the community, even talking to the kitchen staff, and being like, so what is the story of the food in India? You know, and people would say, well, you know, in order to get the fruit to ripen, they use injection and chemicals, and they use dye to make the cucumbers green. They use these sort of things. And I thought, something's fishy. I really want to do some more research. So that's what I did. I kind of began digging, literally digging and interviewing farmers, interviewing people connected to farming, doing a lot of research. And what I found out is that what we consider the third world, which is not a third world at all, but like the classification that, you know, like the World Bank will give someplace like India, has been being exploited for a very long time. And this exploitation comes in many forms, and those forms is basically what Act Naturally started to discover. And it led me to the Green Revolution. It led me to who's profiting off of creating certain problems and trying to solve those problems. So once I was getting a clear picture of what was really going on, then I put myself into a place of creating a nonprofit to try to solve it.
And that is what Act Naturally is.
That is what Act Naturally is. Act Naturally is an international organization that uses solutions like organic farming, biodynamic farming, biodiverse farming to solve problems in health and food security. And that is very needed right now in India, as it's kind of like this huge hotbed where the genetic engineering debate is going on, where development is hitting up against an old paradigm, or an old way of living, a traditional way of living, and market society is causing problems for that traditional way of living. And so how do you design solutions for people who, 20 years ago were bartering for their necessities, and when they started having to buy things like pesticides or seeds, they suddenly had debt, and the debt was too much for them to pay back, and because of that, they're in this cycle. Debt's escalating every year. Debt's getting more and more intense, and you may have heard about the farmer suicides.
Hundreds or maybe thousands of them.
Yes. Well, there's a rural reporter by the name of P. Sainath that's a very famous reporter in India. And he did some digging in the villages and has found that number to be low bid at 200,000. And the National Crime Records Bureau also backs that information up. The problem with that statistic is that that is the reported cases, and those are the official records. Now, there's so many more things, like, for example, women aren't necessarily considered farmers in some of the deeper tribal areas because of a bureaucratic way of categorizing what a farmer is. It's very chauvinistic in that way. And so that the female farmers may not even be counted. So the female farmers who have committed suicide, and also it's kind of a taboo in a way, and so it may not be reported. So that number could be very high. And on top of that number, you have between like the 1991 and 2001, and actually a new census will come out soon to tell us more, we have 8 million farmers in India who left the occupation of farming, and no one knows where they went. What became of the farmers? They're no longer on their land. They've even been driven off their land. Or if they weren't driven off the land was, possessed because of debts or other hardship, and they're gone. And so their whereabouts aren't really accounted for. A lot of theory is that perhaps they're part of the labor class,
Probably in the cities.
In the cities. Always astonished when I was in New Delhi to see so many laborers that are just chipping stones. And the stones that they're chipping, or the rock work they're chipping, there's these huge condos being built, giant luxury condos, and you've got this very thin class of people who are working for, maybe 40 rupees a day if they're very lucky. And unfortunately, a lot of the agricultural sector is moving into those menial jobs. And we can't necessarily say that that's not a purposeful part of agriculture being devalued in a society, because your agricultural workers have to go do something, and that ends up serving those corporations, again, that are pushing for the development. Those agricultural workers then are the labor class that they're using.
Well, so it sounds to me like what you're saying is the corporations, multinational corporations are moving in there, and as part of the Green Revolution are profiting by the debt of these farmers, and then they're able to get the land.
That's right.
And that's happened in Mexico with NAFTA. It's happened. It's happening in this country as well with farms. I forget how many farmers and there used to be in this country compared to what there is now, but a lot of those have been sold for debt as well.
Oh, it's an exact mirror of what happened here at the turn of the 20th century. I mean, small American farms, those farmers had to leave their lands, and suddenly other lands were bought up, and there was giant 1,000 acres or more monocrop farmlands, and they're trying to do that in India slowly. And see, the model is very profitable. If you know how the Green Revolution and why the Green Revolution got started, so you had a lot of stockpile leftover war chemicals. And prior to all these war chemicals from Vietnam, you also had this idea of philanthrocapitalism that was started by the Rockefeller Ford Foundation, but more specifically the Rockefeller Foundation, that we can make this great difference in the world by solving hunger. And of course, you know that J.D. Rockefeller was the owner of Standard Oil. And so you have an oil man deciding how they're going to solve hunger.
Right.
And of course, that's going to include oil products like fossil fuel derivatives like pesticides or fertilizers. And what happened was they launched a massive campaign in India. India has 41 state universities, and they were all targeted with these new American industrial techniques. And
which didn't work that well here either.
It didn't work that well here, and so India was a new place basically to teach these techniques to. And they took one variety of rice and one variety of wheat, and these were high-yielding varieties, and they responded well with pesticides and fertilizers. So they sold this package deal, if you will, to the Indian people. Now, in order to sell this package deal to the Indian people, there was a huge, what we would call like public relations campaign, and that started, like I was saying, through the agricultural universities and moved its way out. There's even, you know, I've been a lot of study lately on how media started affecting villagers, how that affected villagers and their wanting to take up these type of technologies. I wondered, because if you're a farmer and you are preparing your fertilizers from cow dung or your fertilizers from cow urine and these ferments of that, and you're planting with cycles and with the monsoon, how suddenly do you come up with this idea that's a really good idea to kill off these pests in this way? You know, how does it become a good idea to stop growing all these diverse crops and then start just growing one thing? And then why would you go to the idea that I'm going to buy seeds when I never had to buy seeds before? And that question is something that Act Naturally has started working on. And what we found out is that there was a satellite, in fact, that was launched that was called ATS-6. And that satellite gave birth to the SITE project in India, which was to go out to, I think, 2,300 different villages and basically see how effective television would be in disseminating knowledge and education to the people there. And shortly after this satellite was decommissioned, of course, India had their own problems going, their own programs going, and it's interesting that the Ministry of Agriculture had stepped in and really around the same time as the Green Revolution started airing programs in these village towns to get them to adopt new agricultural ways. And so you had this thing called Krishi Darshan, which I still think plays in all over India, which is a farming program that basically teaches the latest and modern agricultural techniques. So it's not by accident. There's this great push and story that it really takes that kind of a massive amount of PR to get people to accept technologies like this. And once they have accepted technology like this, well, then they are in the cycle of debt. Then they can't really get out so easy, and they have to use more and more and more pesticides. So it seems like a hopeless situation in a way. But
well, and that doesn't even take into consideration the damage that the pesticides and the fertilizers do to the soil, the microbe bacteria in the soil, which are really the basis for the fertility to begin with.
Exactly. Exactly. I mean, it's disrupting the soil ecology. It's disrupting the biodiversity of the area. It's turning the area into one giant monocropped field, and in that you make your plants even more susceptible. And once they're more susceptible, then you have to use even more pesticides, because it's like having a big bullseye on your field that says, hey, look, there's no natural predators to fight us off. Let's just attack. Actually, oh, go ahead.
I've read that the productivity does go up the first year.
That's right.
But by the third or fourth year, it's like 2/3 of what it was originally without all the Green Revolution.
That's right. It's a kind of a misnomer. The productivity does go up, but you have to look, when you see these charts, which are brilliant, it shows from like 1965 onward, wheat going up and up and up until, you know, recently, which they there was actually kind of a peak in the whole wheat production capability, and we can discuss why that happened more. But when you look at these charts, you go, oh wow, so wheat production did go up, but that's because what was being planted before, which was many, many, many things, all went into one thing. And so that obviously makes that one thing go have more production numbers. So they can point to those charts all they want, but the reality behind it is that it just produced more wheat, but people cannot just live off of wheat, you know.
And they didn't even grow wheat that much to begin with, probably.
No, it's interesting. You know, rice is definitely a staple, and they had many, many, many different varieties of rice and wheat. But the type of wheat that has been become popular, if you will, through the program that Norman Borlaug, who's the father of the Green Revolution, the man that actually came up with these high-yielding varieties, the type of wheat, that's something that wasn't even native to their country. Actually, there's a documentary that we have tonight that I thought would illustrate some of these problems that I'm talking about. It's called How to Save the World, and it is about this man named Peter Proctor, who was a New Zealand biodynamicist, and he went to India, into South India, and started spreading the word of biodynamics, because he wanted to show that, hey, there are alternatives, and you can feed your people. You don't have to use these chemicals and pesticides. That is absolutely a lie. So you can feed your people, and we'll show you. And we'll show you how to feed your people. So I brought this documentary just to kind of illustrate more visually what I'm talking about. And
so it'd be a good time to play that.
Yeah, it'd be a great time to roll that clip.
All right, so we're ready for that clip, and then we'll come back in, what, 9 minutes, I think it was.
I think it's 9 minutes,
and this is an excerpt from a larger...
Yes, yeah, it's an extract from How to Save the World.
All right, here we go.
You know, if you link organic biodynamic to the Gandhian philosophy and thinking, I think Gandhi really wanted the villages to be self-sufficient. By building up the knowledge base of farmers, the farmers can really become independent. They don't need to depend on external resources, which means they save money. They don't have to buy costly pesticides or fertilizers, and in a way you are teaching them to use their resources to the optimum, thereby reducing your dependency on the outside world. And in a way, one of the core functions of biodynamic is to close the cycle. The farm should be able to produce what it needs for its soil fertility, etc. So I think there is a direct correlation, and I'm sure Gandhi would be very happy to see the growth of the organic and the biodynamic movement in India.
The gene revolution is destroying the genetic base of our food supply. The Indian subcontinent once grew 30,000 varieties of rice. Today, there are no more than 15. The new varieties are environmentally unsustainable and nutritionally deficient. With soils destroyed by Green Revolution chemistry and irrigation now using 2/3 of all sweet water, a genetic quick fix is being promoted to rescue failing crops and ruined soils. In a rural landscape otherwise devoid of advertising, Monsanto's fluorescent green and orange signs are everywhere. 15 years of internationally guided market reforms have unleashed a second wave of agrochemicals and biotech seeds across India with devastating effect. Biotech seeds cost nearly 400% more than conventional seeds. Farmers often find their yield is 30% less. The quality of genetically modified cotton is markedly lower. It has no resistance to India's primary cotton pest, the pink bollworm. The balance of nature is so disrupted, other pests proliferate, and pesticide use increases. Seed dealers get huge commissions from suppliers.
2,4-D is a hormone, recognized hormone weedicide. No, I see. It's old as the hills.
Farmers are often forced to take the genetically modified seeds as part of a credit package. A 2006 report found that 60% of Indian farmers using genetically modified seeds could not recover their investment, let alone feed their families.
Late Wednesday, in his first trip to the country, he was greeted the next day.
In despair, 150,000 Indian farmers have killed themselves since 1993. Some drink their pesticides, while others burn, hang, or drown themselves.
And we have stories in the corporate press in India which are unbelievable.
In March 2006, Indian Prime Minister Manmohan Singh and U.S. President George W. Bush signed an agreement that could bring Indian agriculture under the control of multinational corporations.
Estimates varied from 250,000 to 700,000.
Under the guise of patent rights and seed ownership, this agreement will impose a new kind of serfdom on the rural people of India.
Tens of thousands of farmers have committed suicide. And yet, we arrived here with these corporates like AES and Cogentrix and Unipal. All of them have such dubious records. It's really unbelievable, and yet if you see the way the CEOs and the corporates are fawning over him, and I have to mention this, that
with man only a step ahead of his enemy, new weapons are being devised in the research laboratories. Thousands of new compounds and control techniques are being developed and put through countless tests. Is there a potential hazard to man and animals? It takes years of research until a chemical meets rigid requirements of safety as well as effectiveness. Safety. Safety to man, to animals, to crops, to wildlife, to fish, to beneficial insects, to our total environment.
Nature does not wear a rubber suit and a gas mask. Neither do most Indian farmers. And all the protection in the world becomes irrelevant when the food we eat is poisoned. This film, more than half a century old, is strikingly modern in its belief in the need to subjugate nature to ensure human survival. Combined with the profit motive, it is the driving force behind genetic modification. The further we move away from the growing of our food, the more we lose our understanding of what food actually is.
Really, you are what you eat. That saying is quite true. And if we're eating, well, really deception, isn't it? We're growing food, but it's not from the real true qualities of the earth. And if you eat deception, you'll be deceptive towards others. If you eat untruth, you'll be untruthful. And we're putting our children at such a disadvantage, starting them off in life eating food that isn't true food. How can they grow into true moral people if the food is not supporting that? That's how I feel about it.
Connect the agribusiness dots. Chemical farming demands expensive, escalating inputs. Promised benefits do not materialize. Families fall into the type of poverty that requires international aid, often in the form of the very grains and legumes they once grew successfully. Viewed cynically, it could be seen as the perfect business model. Build a market by creating a need that did not exist, and then expand that market until it wraps an entire nation in dependency. World hunger is not caused by food scarcity. It is caused by trade liberalization, industrial agriculture, genetic engineering, and military dominance.
We're back. Well, that kind of emphasized and underlined a lot of what we were talking about, so we're going to continue on. We've got another little clip to play in a little while. And so I just saw the Growing Concern with Act Naturally. So Act Naturally is, it's a website, but it's also a 501c3.
That's right.
And it's an organization that you began.
That's right. Organization that I began that basically tries to solve issues in health and food security by encouraging farmers to go organic.
And that's just specifically in India.
Specifically in India. Biodynamic, any biodiverse, non-violent, that's really important, non-violent agricultural practice. And we have 6 programs actually that run. There's the Sponsor a Farm program, and that program, and just let me let you know, you can go to the website at www.actnaturally.org, and you can also look at all those programs. But the Sponsor a Farm program basically is there to help link people who are concerned with the practical on-the-ground solutions. So, you know, they donate to things like micro livestock or chicken tractors, actual real solutions that can be given to a farmer right away, given to maybe somebody that's just right on the edge of having to give their land away or their land be repossessed. And then there's the Ket Jyoti Fund, which means Farm Light Fund, and that is a fund that's set aside to collect money specifically to pay off debts. Now, the paying off of the debts, it comes with a transition program. It's a transition program of 4 years. So they have 4 years basically to go from heavy chemical, completely parched, dead soil agriculture to organic, sustainable agriculture. And there's, you know, it's not a national certification, as in it's not a national organic certification, but it is a value-added product that they have at the end of that 4 years, because they can, people can taste the difference. They can taste that it is organic. And, you know, organic is kind of not a term that, it's like calling a small ant small. You don't need the adjective. We know that the ant is small. So in India, there's been so much organic agriculture before the Green Revolution, and in pockets that you don't have to say the word organic. It was just, oh, okay, of course it's organic. Mm-hmm. So along with that, we're also starting a small Act Naturally ashram farm and community garden, and that is a place where people can come and learn agricultural techniques, and that's
relearn them basically.
And relearn agricultural techniques, and that's using the community farmers and local NGOs that are already there. And that's a little further down the line. We also spend a lot of time on our information campaign. There isn't a lot of information right now out there on the fact that organics and biodynamics, biodiverse agriculture actually can feed the world. It's not a problem with scarcity, it's a problem with distribution, it's a problem with who owns the distribution, who owns the seeds. It has nothing to do with what can be output from this beautiful earth. If you have a correct relationship, you can produce the food. And we are also making a documentary, and that's actually why I'm in Portland, is trying to raise money and resources for the documentary. And that documentary is going to give the farmers a chance to tell their story. Basically, the story of the Green Revolution is very present in the middle class of India. It's very present all over India as perhaps the only solution to starvation. And why has starvation become this huge thing that we all attach to? Well, it's a story that corporations and foundations can conveniently attach to so that they can sell us the solutions to it. And actually the solution, as Gandhi believed, was that it would come from a self-reliant people who could grow their own food, who weren't owned by foreign interests. And so with that spirit, with the spirit of Gandhi, we want to, in this documentary, basically tell the side of the farmer's story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You know, it strikes to me that not only are they talking about starvation, but you could be talking about starvation in areas where people are getting enough volume to eat, but with a lack of biodiversity, their diets have been changed to such a degree that they don't have the nutrition that they did at one time. That's right.
That's right. There's a lot of research out there that shows that the mineral content, even the vitamin content of the foods that are being distributed to the people, even through USAID, the very it's interesting, right? The very wheat that that they're growing doesn't necessarily go to them. The wheat gets subsidized from the America and comes to India, and the wheat that's being grown from the Green Revolution is then distributed away from the people who you would think it would benefit, but that's not actually the case because of how international markets are working right now. And that wheat that they have access to is very depleted in minerals and probably the lowest quality that you can find. So you're right. It's if they were able to grow you know, pulses, and they were able to grow vegetables and these things in more of a biodiverse relationship, they would get a full nutritional profile. And you can see that industry is really, especially in India when I visited, I was actually shocked to see McDonald's and KFC and Papa John's and all these American brands. Industry has co-opted the nutrition there. I mean, 100%. It's going the same way that it has in America. It looks like you've walked into a 7-Eleven and are looking at all the logoed food, you know?
Order a chili dog.
You can, yeah, exactly. It's very strange. So the concept of what is going to show their material wealth is very strange. If you're buying American brands, well, then that's going to show your material wealth.
Yeah, you get the prestige of it.
The prestige, but what's strange is, you know, for all the Snickers and the whatever it happens to be, they're not getting the food value that they need to.
Same thing here.
Same thing here.
You know, we overeat and we're obese, but most people aren't getting the nutrition they need.
Yeah, they're getting plenty of calories, but inside of that, they're not getting enzymes, they're not getting proper nutrition, and they're eating too many of the wrong things. Their bodies are too acidic, and with that steps in the pharmaceutical industry. Everybody's kind of shaking hands, right? You know, agriculture is not producing healthy enough food, and in fact, it's producing food that's toxic, and so the pharmaceutical industry is there to also make profits off of the unhealthy people.
Which also has its connection to the petroleum industry.
Exactly. All of it somehow goes back to the petroleum industry. It's really, it's quite...
Worst thing that ever happened to our planet.
Worst thing that ever happened. Yeah, I agree with you there. It's interesting for maybe our viewers to even look into how this type of story has even been sold. And when I started doing research into this, it goes all the way back to public relations and how public relations has really shaped the thinking of the American people, and now how it's shaping, you know, the thinking of people worldwide and opening the markets worldwide. And A lot of it had to do with this man by the name of Edward Bernays. I don't know if you've heard of this man. He was a public relations specialist that was in charge of helping the image of John D. Rockefeller, but also he was Sigmund Freud's nephew, and so as Sigmund Freud's nephew, he believed that, you know, everyone has these deeper, unconscious desires that you can manipulate, and you can manipulate that through advertising and public relations. And you know, that we used to be, at least in America, we weren't a culture necessarily that bought stuff we just didn't need. I mean, this is a very new thing, 100 years of, you know, mass marketing and public relations.
And then having to buy the next new thing.
And then having to buy the next new thing. Planned obsolescence. I mean, you even see planned obsolescence in genetically modified seeds, because the next year Monsanto will come up with another brand, and the next year they'll come up with another thing and another fix. So it's always having to buy. Well, this was started at the turn of the last century through public relations campaigns with Edward Bernays, and those techniques have been effectively exported to India, and you can see it in the advertising. You can see it when Coca-Cola's gone over there, and some of the other multinationals, and they've literally gotten people to move away from their native diets and move into a more want-based society. And actually, to this point, we could go back to that documentary again. Again, that documentary is How to Save the World.
And this is the second clip from there.
This is the second clip, yeah. And
all right, we're running out of time. It's a good idea.
I think it's a good idea, yeah.
All right.
The mixed preparations are then sprayed in homeopathic concentrations. Microorganisms in the soil are activated. Plants deepen their roots. Soil structure improves, and worms mysteriously get busy. The water is thoroughly permeated by the life force imbued in the biodynamic preparation. The whole mass of water has become dynamic. Every droplet of water now carries this life. Even the way preparations are sprayed matters. The spiral, from seed heads and shells to cyclones and galaxies, forms the core of nature. Biodynamics is as much concerned with the soil as with the plant itself. In biodynamics, the soil is everything.
My plowman, he's been working for me for the last 25 years. I asked him, how was the land when you started? He said it was quite hard, like a rock. I said, why? He said, because we were adding a lot of chemical at that time. I said, how is it now? He said, in the last 6 years, we have put in compost and a lot of other things, doing green manure, and it's become like cotton, and even further it's become like butter. It's become like butter. It's so smooth and so easy to cultivate. And I've got some corns in my feet, and they used to pain me a lot when I used to do it 25 years ago, but as of today they don't hurt me. I asked him, how come there are so many birds? He said, there's such a big population of earthworms now, and as I cultivate, they come and eat the earthworms, they eat the insects and all that.
At the Mahatma Gandhi ashram in Ahmedabad, we are reminded of the essence of Gandhi's message: food sovereignty. The right of all people to define their own food and agriculture free of international market forces. In 1930, Gandhi led the legendary Salt March. It was an act of civil disobedience against British law that made it illegal to manufacture, collect, possess, or trade in salt.
We also want the similar independence where we have our own freedom to grow whatever we want, to eat whatever we want. We don't want any Monsanto or Syngenta to tell us what seeds we grow, what crops we should harvest, and what food we eat. In India, more than 60% of the Indian population are dependent on farming, and they are mainly the small and marginal farmers with maximum of 1 hectare of land. And if they will be taken to the court for infringement of patent and will be fined for about 1 million or 2 million of rupees, you can imagine what will happen. The major campaign in India which is going on is promoting and encouraging the alternative forms of agriculture. Whether you call it organic farming, you call it biodynamic farming, you call it natural farming. These are basically non-toxic, non-chemical forms of farming where farmers are practicing a farming which doesn't require any use of chemicals. But the second advantage is that they are not required to use Monsanto seeds. They are not required to use any hybrid seeds in these sort of alternative forms of farming. Once you have the seed in your hand, the indigenous desi varieties of seeds, they can plant it year after year. They are exchange it with the neighboring farmers. They can sell it as seeds. While if they grow Monsanto seeds, they can't even use it next year. Not only because it has got patent on it, but this is genetically not allowed. In several areas in India, the movement is going on to declare their region, their villages, their taluks as no GMO zones. Then there are farmer unions who are putting their act together to tell their farmers, to tell their cadres not to grow BT cotton, not to buy chemicals.
We probably should go back into your organization, Act Naturally, and you said that you were working on a documentary, which means you're probably going to go back to India and you're probably going to be collecting interviews.
That's right, that's right.
And you say you speak a little bit of the language, which is, I was wondering earlier how you would be able to do that.
Right. Well, the documentary is going to, the name of it is still under debate, but right now we're calling it Kundrati Karma, which in Hindi means nature's karma. And we're making a teaser video right now for it that basically will be disseminated all over the web and to individuals trying to get their support for it. And actually, I would like to talk about how the project's coming together. It's really unique. We're working with a Colombian cinematographer named Helkin Rene Diaz, and he did some video shoot for this documentary that's coming out named Jala, and that's him right there in India with his mobile equipment. He signed on to the project, an amazing cinematographer, and along with him, of course, we have a logistics and translator, kind of a travel coordinator, that's taking care of all the many stops and all the villages that we have to go to. And his name is Rohit, and actually it goes by Co-Survivor. And people can check out his work online at cosurvivor.in. And really amazing photography, landscape photography. Also, there are people coming out of the woodwork to kind of also support the project. This man who does some After Effects and video work called Palash Vaswamy, also in India, he's signed on to help us out. Here in Portland, teamed up with Pixel Face from Pixel Face Creative, and he is working with me to get this teaser video. People are curious about the documentary, the synopsis and details on it. They can go to several websites, actually. They can go to www.actnaturally.org. They can also go to the GoFundMe /ActNaturallyDocumentary. And there's also a blog site that I manage, and I'm in charge of a lot of things at once.
Busy lady.
Yeah, very busy. But I started the blog site basically as a research portal for other people. It takes a lot of time to, and there's an example of the blog right there. It takes a lot of time to collect resources. And it basically has like farming legislation, links to the Indian Constitution, recent acts, recent news. That can be found at actnaturallyblog.wordpress.com.
Yeah, right.
So people can go to the blog, and there's actually a Facebook page too. So we're all over the internet right now.
So that's just Act Naturally at Facebook. Then.
Yeah,
Right.
People are adding every day. More and more people are coming to the site. And what's really great about this is they're actually helping me understand the issue more. You know, I've got so many Indian people who are also concerned about the issue, and we share a lot of information on a daily basis about what they know, about what I know. So it's truly a collaborative project. It's been really good.
Mm-hmm. Well, it sounds to me like being that, was it 1/6 of the planet, I believe, lives on that Indian subcontinent.
A huge amount of people.
Yeah,
1.2 billion people.
1.2 billion, so it's 6 billion. So it's getting up there. A fair amount of people live there, and folks out there and the viewers may wonder, well, there's so many issues out there with the occupations going on in this country, when people are finally starting to realize some of the things that are going on in other countries are also going on here as well.
Right.
And why should we put our energy or our support into making things right in India?
Right.
So,
well, that's a good question, and it's one I get a lot. Actually, 1/8 of the world's biodiversity is in India still, and there's a lot of untouched landscapes still to this day. And more importantly, there's many cultures who have not been steamrolled into like village Adivasis, village tribal people who have not been steamrolled into market society completely yet. They still have skills like going into the forest and harvesting what they need for their food. These are skills that has largely been lost, and as a people, we possibly are going to need those in the future. We're going to need people to be able to tell us how to walk a little lighter on this earth by watching their example. There's a good story about this woman who goes out, and she's in a Kora tribe, and she goes out and she's looking at this tree, and she says, there's 32 products alone that I get from this tree. And if I can't live off of the forest, then I have to buy everything. I have to buy all of those 32 things to make my daily bread, to make my life. And how expensive that becomes.
And complicated.
And complicated. And a lot of the indigenous traditional knowledge, pest controls and fertilizers that have been used for thousands of years, we're also going to need that. We're also going to need people who are willing to work, willing to work the earth, and have been. We haven't paid enough respect. If you consider, I think, Arunata Mittal, you interviewed her, she was saying that something like 80% of the food that's imported into the West comes from India, comes from Africa. Now as their livelihoods are going under threat, I think it's time that we pay attention to them. I think it's time that we can be saying, we really honor who you are, and let's not take so much. Let's try to give something back.
Sure. It strikes me that a lot of the reason why people believe we need to be in Iraq because we went in there and broke it.
Right.
So we got to fix it. Well, the Western technology, maybe not necessarily all United States companies, but that whole paradigm is in destroying India and other countries as well.
Our future as a country and as a people in the United States to honor other people's rights, natural right to their land, their farming, their medicines, their techniques, without compromising that or supporting the corporations that do compromise that. To me, that's food security all around. Nobody hates you if you're allowing them to continue their tradition. You know, this idea, this manifest destiny that is spread all over the world, it's very archaic sort of, well, we'll see what happened to the Native Americans, you know. It's the same thing that happened to them that happens now when we go, oh, well, we can just take the lands from these people.
It's a euphemism for empire.
It's a euphemism for empire, that's right. So I think the solution when we look at this is not to, if we want to help, it's not to go over and say, hey, we know what to do. It's to empower everyone to be able to do what they know how to do. Use the traditional farming techniques again. Well, that's going to take a two-pronged approach. That's going to take people being aware enough to take people like Monsanto out of the market completely by saying we don't stand for it anymore, and also by providing some resources such as money and hands to work and help rebuild this.
Photovoltaic cells possibly for, you know, we don't want to bring them diesel generators, but there is part of the modern technology that could be useful over there. That's right, and something that's really encouraging that I've taken heart in, and a lot of people will come up to me and say, well, I just don't understand, how do you solve something like this? You know, the empire is so big and Monsanto is so huge and Cargill and all of these agribusiness corporations, and what I have to say is we really outnumber them. And there's this book that I've been reading lately called The Spider and the Starfish. I don't know if you've heard of it. I think I've heard that name, yes.
It's interesting. It's a spider, of course, if you cut off the head, it's dead. But if you cut the arm off of a starfish, it can still regenerate. So how do you create organizations that are capable of kind of following that methodology? In other words, it's not a hierarchy of structure. It's not top-down. People are all empowered to do the right thing. They have the tools to do the right thing. They share the same mission. In that case, if you look at it like it's a pyramid, the people at the top of the pyramid, let's say the Monsantos, the Wall Street, all these things now that we're bringing attention to, are based on a big, wide base of millions, billions of people who all are at the bottom and tightly controlled. But if they start to quake, that top comes down. So
they're bearing all the weight of everything above them.
They're bearing all the weight, but they don't have to. And this quote, well, once a slave, you see everyone as a slave, might be a part of the paradigm that has to be changed. As in, people have to be empowered to really enjoy who they are, what their culture is, what they've known, traditionally speaking, and not give it up for these new logos in this market society and disposable culture, because it took them thousands of years and their ancestors thousands of years to be able to cultivate these things.
People don't realize, but there was what, Mohenjo-Daro, there were civilizations on the Indus and the rivers in India that were, you know, they were simultaneous with what we call the first civilizations in Egypt and the Fertile Crescent. Now, the civilization goes back 5,000 years there as well. And what you've been talking about was probably, some of it was probably being first discovered back then.
Oh, of course, of course. You know, there's a place that I visited when I was in India called Ladakh. It was just a beautiful place. It's northern India, right under Kashmir. And I think it's a really good example of what has happened once Western development paradigm comes into a place that was more matrilineal, having common property. And this woman by the name of Helena Norberg Hodges, who did a documentary called The Economics of Happiness.
I'm familiar with her name.
She actually was in Ladakh in the 70s and saw it and was with the Ladakhi people before the introduction of tourism brought in a lot of Western brands and these sort of things. And she noticed that that society in particular worked together. They helped build irrigation channels together. They would stipend when they would harvest so that one family could go and help another family, and the other family would then go and trade back and help. And that type of labor was completely valuable. That type of labor was, there's no way to put a monetary value on it, in fact. And what happened was when it was opened up for tourism, within a small amount of time, 20 years, they now have psychological problems, alcoholism, diabetes, obesity. And so the effects of the market society, it's quick. It's very rapid on these people. Taking that patriarchal, hierarchical, top-down structure and forcing it onto people, and this false value of the dollar onto people who had the value of their world in relationship into the land because it was survival, but it was also smart. You don't mess up the very place that you have to live from. It doesn't make much sense.
No, it doesn't. You know, and everything that we're just talking about is exactly what's going on downtown here and in other cities. Lateral hierarchy, you know, everybody being a part of it rather than, you know, somebody up on top dictating everything. Right. That whole awareness now is starting to take hold in this country and everywhere else. But we're down to about 3.5 minutes, so we should probably get back to talking. Might be a little bit repetitious, but about the Act Naturally, and you're looking for support. I am.
Well, Act Naturally is a nonprofit, and we rely on people to really show their compassion and support to us, you know, if they resonate with this issue. There are many ways they can give. They can donate time, resources, all kinds of things. And they can do that by visiting the website, again, actnaturally.org. And specifically for the documentary, they can go to GoFundMe/ActNaturallyDocumentary.
GoFundMe.
/ActNaturallyDocumentary. Right. So it's actually GoFundMe.com/ActNaturallyDocumentary, and they can go and show their support there. They can at any time email me at info@actnaturally.org, and that is if they have any questions or they have ideas. You know, part of the thing about having a nonprofit is that I am opening this up. You know, some of the programs can even be designed by the suggestions of other people. I have no way do I want to be the person in the director's chair saying it has to be this way. You know, it is open for modification, and the more people involved, actually, the better, because that'll help spread the message.
Right, and that, I think, is probably the most important point. Yeah. There's so much that could be said about what's going on in India and what's going on all over the world. I mean, the fact that it might be Monsanto, it might not, but they've gone over there into India and other places, and they've patented plants that people have been using for centuries.
That's right.
There's an incredible amount of injustice that's going on over there. You know, that is linked to food, and food is the most important thing. Yeah,
food and water, both things right now are being privatized, and to our detriment.
And they should be a human right.
That's right. They should be a human right. They are a human right. Let me just thank a few people real quick.
Sure. I got a little over a minute.
I want to thank Emily, who's in the control room tonight. She has helped really put this on. I want to also thank Helkin in Bogota, Colombia, Rohit, who's in India, Palash in India, Pixel Face, who's helping with the teaser. I want to thank you for bringing me onto the show.
Got about 10 seconds here, so I appreciate you coming on.
Thank you.
This information needs to be out there. People need to be aware that we're plugged into the rest of the world.